Welcome to Last Words here on The Pit. My name is Kat Jones. I'm the editorial director at The Pit. And normally I'm behind the scenes. You don't see me on the show. But this week we've given the normal hosts, Jordan, Travis, and Katie, the week off because last week we were talking about how the metal community has come together in support of Black Lives Matter and all the great things that they're doing to raise money and awareness right now. And we also talked about a bunch of Black artists that you should check out. But this week, we want to hand the microphone over to some Black voices to talk about what it's like being a Black person in the metal world today. So first, I want to introduce you to someone who has been a hero of mine for a very long time. Her name's Laina Dawes. She wrote an amazing book called What Are You Doing Here? A Black woman's life and liberation in heavy metal. She's also currently pursuing a doctorate in ethnomusicology at Columbia University. And she's a music journalist. She's a former concert photographer. And in her spare time, she also runs Women Clap Back, which is an informal collective in New York that produces panels and events dedicated to sharing the experiences of women of color in the alternative arts. Laina, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you.
And next we have Ethan McCarthy, who is the frontman and songwriter in the bands Primitive Man, Vermin Womb, and Many Blessings. And he also runs the booking agency Heavy Talent and does art under the name Hell Simulation and is one of the reasons that Denver has the metal scene that it has. How are you doing, Ethan?
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Last but certainly not least, we have Jason Aalon Butler, who is the frontman of Fever 333 and formerly was the singer of the post-hardcore band Let Live. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kat, but you are doing phenomenal. I'm trying to do as well as you are. That's let me tell you right now, on multiple levels.
You're very sweet. To start things off, why don't you all tell me a little bit about how you fell in love with heavy metal in the first place and how life has led you to where you are now? Let's start with Jason.
I really saw a pretty kindred sort of relationship with punk rock and hardcore and metal due to its like aberrant nature relative to where I was living. I'm from Inglewood, California. Just the sort of being within Black culture in that area specifically, which is a very concentrated Black population. Just listening to the music itself was wild. It was like, again, a very aberrant activity. I think that there was just always something about that, just the idea of, owning one's own individuality just by having a sonic representation. All you had to do was put a tape on. I think that I fell in love with it because I felt like it gave me an idea of I guess, contrasting who I am with where I was. And also I think that my first love is hip hop, R&B, funk, and soul. I guess my first love, and that was extremely emotive music, just by nature of sort of where it comes from and who plays it typically, or at least originally. And I think I found a lot of the emotive qualities that I found in the music that I was, I guess, initially drawn to, hip hop and soul and funk. I saw a lot of the same emotional and emotive qualities and cathartic qualities in punk rock, hardcore, metal, and such. So initially, it was because I thought that they shared DNA. I thought that it was something that was subversive, just by, inherently subversive and challenging the things around it. And it spoke to me in a way sonically that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck and made me want to go full throttle at whatever it was I was doing or wanted to do, with that being my sort of soundtrack. So that's kind of where I started my journey in guitar, heavier guitar-based music.
You call your shows demonstrations. How'd that start?
I just wanted people to feel as though they could come to a space that allowed them to represent themselves and who they are or who they want to be. To really jump into it really quickly, actually, so speaking on what I was discussing earlier, right? My introduction to rock and punk rock and metal was not really wasn't met with what I had expected or anticipated. So I came into this space thinking that it was inclusive. I came into this space thinking that it was like for everybody, and it always touted this very inclusive nature, and I found that to be endearing. When I involved myself in it, I didn't really see anyone that looked like me. I saw very, very few people that come from the background that I did as far as like a societal demographic. And when I would show up at these shows or concerts, I felt quite lonely in a room full of people in a lot of ways. And I think that the demonstration idea for Fever 333 is I want people to exhibit who they are or who they want to be and who they believe themselves to be, with a world that outside makes you feel like you have to subscribe to, quite exacting or particular characteristics or attributes to a scene societally. I found a lot of that behavior and a lot of that expectation. I found a lot of that in the music that I believed was supposed to be smashing that, if I'm being completely honest. So for me, carrying and being a part of this thing known as guitar-based music, rock music, punk rock, metal, etc., I wanted to make sure that people understood that the first thing that you should walk into when you partake in a Fever demonstration is a sense of who you are versus who you have to be. And I want people to understand that what we do on that stage is our own rendition and iteration of activism through art. And I want to lead with that before anything. And I want people to come into this space knowing exactly what it is, and I want them to know that they can partake in that thing. It may seem highfalutin, it may seem hyperbolic to some people, but to me and our team and everyone involved in the project, it is exactly what we believe it needs to be in this time now, especially. And it was the same thing before then. It's just we got more people listening now because of current events. I think that this space needs to open itself up a lot more largely to people that don't fit into the heteronormative Caucasian cisgender sliver of rock music that I think has been quite dominant for so long, which was a microcosmic view of a much larger macro situation. So the long short, our demonstrations are just a place where you can fucking demonstrate, exemplify, and exhibit who it is you are in a safe space and have those conversations and have those experiences.
Hell yeah. It's awesome. The first time I ever really became acquainted with your art was when you did your K-Pit for Kerrang when I was working for them. And I remember just thinking, holy shit, this band has filled a Rage Against the Machine hole in my heart. So thank you for doing what you do. So what about you, Laina? How did your life lead you to where you are now, and how did you fall in love with heavy metal?
Well, I grew up in a very rural part of Ontario, Canada. I was adopted, so my family is white, and I had, racist redneck neighbors, and they listened to, and there was lots of field. So I would hear Smoke in the Water from Deep Purple kind of emanate into my bedroom on summer nights. I guess I first kind of started taking heavy metal seriously when I was about 8. There was, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a made-for-TV movie with Kiss called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. And, my brothers and sisters, we were all sitting around, and I was just kind of mesmerized by the costuming, the makeup. These guys looked scary. They looked evil. The music at that time I thought was heavy, which now it's not. But I really kind of fell in love with the fact that I was frightened, but I was also excited. So for my birthday, I got Kiss Double Platinum. I had an older sister who was really into the Clash, the Violent Femmes, obviously the Sex Pistols, and she got into AC/DC. So then I got into AC/DC, and then I started kind of looking for something harder. So I'm a huge Judas Priest fan, And I really followed their career since the time I was about 11 or 12, and just kind of kept on looking for heavier and heavier and heavier music. I think for me, growing up in a predominantly, basically an all-white environment, I was a very angry kid. I think I was first called a nigger at 5. And I was looking for something that I could vent my anger to, So all the way through high school, all the way through public school, if I had a bad day, I'd go into my bedroom and blast Queensryche or Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or, Motorhead or just something heavy, and that kind of got me through. And I just felt like I was channeling my anger into something more. When I was in university, I started writing about music, and thought and was told that as a Black woman, I could not write about heavy metal, and kind of believed that for many years until somebody gave me a break. And the break came in early 2000s. A few years later, I started writing for Metalhead magazine, right up until they folded, which is like 2008, 2009. And so ever since then, I've been kind of freelancing. I got into concert photography about 7 or 8 years ago. And so I was able to shoot at MDF and various other like underground extreme metal festivals and concerts around the States. And in 2013, I moved from Toronto to New York for graduate school. And so I've been here I did a master's, and now I'm doing my PhD at Columbia University. It seems like we're going to have a lot to talk about in this conversation, because the work that I'm really interested in now is really about kind of the Black body and performance, and how within extreme metal, I'm really interested in like the movement and the freedom that Black male musicians have on stage. And I'm really interested in also kind of thinking about sexuality for women and how we can express ourselves and we can liberate ourselves within these underground environments.
So Ethan, what about you? How did you fall in love with heavy metal, and how did your life get you to where you are now?
My mother divorced my father, got in a second marriage. He had a child that was 13 years older than me, but I've known him since I was like 2 years old, So I always really looked up to him, and he was playing bass and exposing me to all this real heavy shit since I was probably like 4 years old. So I've always really liked heavy metal, and I grew up idolizing my brother and watching him do it. And then, I got to be like 8 years old, and he got me an acoustic guitar, and then I've just been playing ever since. And the first thing I tried to do was try to play some metal songs. So I was fortunate that he was into my life so early, and I was able to discover it so early, and a lot easier than a lot of my peers. It was just like in my home. So I just have been playing my whole life, and I grew up in a musical household, so I have appreciation for all sorts of music, and I like a lot of things, but metal has just always been what I wanted to play. Like Laina, racial slurs and shit started for me at like 4 or 5 years old. So I grew up with this anger that I felt like only metal could express, and I could only express myself in this violent way through this violent music. So for me, I like the heaviest of shit, in my whole life I've just strived to find the heaviest things that express that raw emotion and that raw anger. And that's not to say that other music can't express these things, but nothing does it like extreme music.
And Primitive Man truly is like the heaviest thing I have ever heard in my life. I think our last episode, we had Aaron Riesberg from Yob as a guest, and he was like, I'm pretty sure that Ethan sounds like a brontosaurus, or like whatever the biggest dinosaur is. That's what he sounds like. I was like, that's a very apt description.
I'll take it. I appreciate that.
I love it. And then really quickly for you, Ethan, I forgot I was going to ask, you have been releasing those propaganda graphic designs that you've been putting out. What was the inspiration for that?
I've always made this kind of shit, but have really ramped it up just because things are crazy. You know, I can't tour. I can't book tours. I can't get together with my bandmates to write songs. And, you know, with everything being what it is, I just felt like I had to express how I was feeling about it, and shit was eating me up. And then I'm also, you know, able to like raise money for causes and at the same time. So it was just like a way to help and a way to get some of these thoughts and feelings out, because I don't spend a lot of time arguing with people on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, I'll read that shit, but I won't engage with racists on the internet or anything, because it is just so emotionally draining. So I would just rather just create something and then that's that. Well, and I'm also, so I'm really influenced by Emory Douglas, who made like a lot of art for the Black Panthers and stuff. And I was just like looking at his art and getting inspired. And I don't know. And I just thought, I just wanted to do a little bit of the same too. That's in there as well. When things started to pop off in Minneapolis and everything, I was just doing a lot of thinking, and I just looked at Emory Douglas, and so I went with that. You know, that's another thing I had to bring that up, just because of the nature of what it is. I wouldn't have started making things like that if I hadn't discovered Emory Douglas's art.
I found it interesting too. I found the common denominator with all of us coming from, like, as far as like, at least when Laina was describing her background, and then I described my background, and then you described yours, it was like, they may be different, like situationally or geographically or circumstantially, you know what I'm saying? Like these, but the one thing we said was that it was a contrasting and, like, again, like, alternative way to express yourself. And that was what attracted us to this music. And I think that there's something really, really, like, much bigger than just like what's on the surface of that. I think that this is an inherent nature that some human beings possess, to really sort of, that are attracted to things that are not normative or not considered, you know, normal. And I think that's, you know what I'm saying? I think that's really, really a beautiful thing. And beyond, you know, us as people of color, that's already crazy. You know what I'm saying? But then, like, on a general humanistic level, I think that's very beautiful. And I think that feeds into progress on a level of humanity. And I think we need these people. We need Lainas. We need Ethans. We need these people to speak up. You know, Ethan, when you were saying that, people want to get, you know, they want to feel touched when you speak up, but we need this, and they don't even know it. And I think that it's our duty. If you feel inclined, you need to make this art, Ethan. You need to make this. You need to write these books, Laina. Like, this is what we are supposed to do. Whatever you subscribe to, religiously, spiritually, even politically at this point, this is beyond that. This is like almost like a fated duty that we have and that you're answering to. And I think it's really, I think we should be, you know, hearing each other and really sort of respecting and loving and showing love to each other like that. And on that point you made, Ethan, about Emory Douglas, so our logo, this logo here on the back, is actually our iteration of Emory Douglas's iteration of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which he actually took from a political party that had to be made for Black people, because you needed a symbol back then. You needed an actual insignia. And I reached out to Mr. Douglas and I told him what we were doing and why. And he actually, I wasn't even going to use this at first. Someone was like, what if we do this? Because I based the whole band off of Black Panther Party for Self-Defense for the most part, our approaches and ideologies. And then he wrote back and said, I saw your mission, I read it, I see what you're doing, and I would love it if you used it. So I just thought it was so amazing that we've got these relationships and you see what it is on that level, and Laina feels it on that, you know, when she's writing about Black people in the scene and this inherent sense of discomfort, and then we all come together on this call and talk about the exact same things. That is a very unique and special thing that we as Black people, as people of color in this scene have. And instead of us and the youth, the young people that may see this, and newer brown and Black and faces they consider other coming into the scene, you need to consider that shit a gift. You are lucky to have this little secret society within a larger society of rock and hardcore and metal. You are lucky to have this, and it's unique and it is beautiful. So
I say that shit all the time. I'm like, we need to stick together. It's especially, I don't know, it's important to stick together because we all have this shared experience that is not common because of the traditional demographic of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I started off, I mean, I was really into the grunge scene, so that was my era. And so in Toronto, like I just went to every single show and was always me and my best friend were always the only black people there. So there was lots of, it's interesting because I didn't really get a lot of, there was always kind of people saying shit to you. I was able to ignore it when I was young. But once I started working and once I started covering shows, I got my photo pass or my press pass, and I was actually going backstage or, you know, talking to bands or people I know. I think that's when the kind of the racism starts. And that's when you start kind of noticing that people are, you know, pretty violent, can be pretty violent towards you if they don't want you in the scene. So a lot of my work now, and my dissertation is really about kind of looking, you know, interviewing black men and women in the extreme metal scenes across North America, looking at how race and identity can be cultivated through the scene, instead of kind of the stereotypes of black people hating themselves and wanting to be white. I'm really interested in the opposite because the majority of all the people that I've met are really kind of negotiating this their black identity within this predominantly white male scene that, you know, most of the time doesn't want us there.
Often, you know, especially like as a music journalist, I'm constantly looking at social media for our site or for sites that I've written for in the past. And often when politics come into music, you see comment sections full of people saying, keep politics out of music. And how do you feel about that? And how would you respond to those people?
Yeah, no, I'm dealing with that right now because I wrote an op-ed for Metal Hammer last week.
Which is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, the comments weren't so amazing, but you know, it is what it is. But you know, but this came up. I was talking to the editor later, and a lot of people were saying like, "There's no politics in metal." I'm like, this is such bullshit. Okay, first of all, the lyricism historically, if you want to go back to Black Sabbath in like 1972, or was it 1970 when their first album came out, you know, they were talking about politics. They were talking about the working conditions in Birmingham when they were growing up. You know, like historically and lyrically, politics have always been a place of heavy metal. When people say they don't want to talk about politics and heavy metal, what they really don't want to talk about is racism. They don't want to talk about sexism. They don't want to talk about transphobia or any of the isms in the outside world. And it's just kind of like this really passive aggressive bullshit that people kind of use to dismiss people talking about actual events. And when you're creating music within a society where there are class tensions, race tensions, like right now, you know, we're like this fucking world, like fucking America right now, everything you create within this space is going to be political. Okay? That, I mean, I'm so tired of hearing that, and I'm so tired of people using that as a straw man argument to just basically say, I'm not interested in what you're saying. I don't care what you're saying. You know, that's what they say when they basically are saying, not only do I not care what you're saying, but it will upset me to even think about it. Therefore, I'm going to accuse you of bringing politics into heavy metal.
I'm like,
I had to get off my chest.
I'm like, yeah, no, you know, the thing is, like, for us, I mean, I don't mean to speak for everybody, but it's like, you know, waking up every day and living in this world and trying to exist within an alternative music genre is a political act in itself. You don't want to hear about that shit because you don't know anything about it.
Right.
Speak on it. God damn.
You know, and if they would take 2 minutes to consider what that would be like, they'd feel a little bit different, but they don't want to confront that reality. They don't want to confront that they, in my opinion, are not on the right page. They can't put themselves in other people's shoes. And that shit is a huge problem in America right now, you know?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is that, I think the most confronting thing about it is that when you have to take a look at what's happening and the things that most of, you know, that a large contingent piece of this country's culture and also globally too, like the larger collective culture that has been most influential in art, if we're going to talk about specifically in art right now, has been Black culture. I mean, for as long as, you know, you could go back to fucking Beethoven. Motherfuckers want to talk about him like he was white, which he was not. His mother was African Muslim. Like, come on now.
Shit, I didn't even know that.
That's what I'm saying, though. It's like, I think that it's this. I think it's like this. I think people don't want to talk about it. Like even said, yes, they are not, probably not on the right side. And as you see yourself being on the losing side, you're going to stick your heels into the hill that you're going to die on because you feel like you have to, but you are afraid of what is to come. Again, a fateful end. But also, when you look at the problem, and you see the chinks in the armor and the holes and the dips and the potholes, you start to see that they look a lot like you and your behavior. And that's confronting, right? You go, oh, wait a minute, this is fucked up, and I'm part of the problem. You know, people that want to say, like, I'm not racist, I'm not that, I'm this. You racist. You know why?
You just don't want to confront it. You just don't want to confront it. You don't want to face your crimes with the shit that you have helped to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to be naturally absolved, as if just saying you didn't do it, saying that you are not it, doesn't change that you thought about it, doesn't change your previous behavior, doesn't change the problematic behavior that you sustain with your everyday life. While we, as Black people and people of color, and all the isms that was mentioned by Laina, literally our very act of existence is punk rock, metal, hardcore on a foundational and ethical level. That's what these things were supposed to be to begin with, is something so challenging by the virtue of its existence. And I think that we had no choice as people of color and Black people and trans, gay, lesbian, queer, you know what I'm saying, brown, Asian, indigenous. We had no choice but to be political because we built the motherfucking politics. We built this motherfucker. We were used, our labor, we created like the first iteration of the proletariat movement. Our labor was utilized and paid for in pennies. I'm not finished, baby, but I will be in a little bit. Remember what we talked about earlier? Okay? Okay. So we thank you, baby. Thank you, though. We created this. And so we were involved in politics, whether we liked it or not. So for you to go separate and unpack politics from music, and especially the Black folk, separate your politics from music, that's another movement of another racist and privileged movement. You were asking us to do something that you told us to do in the first place, and now since you are feeling some type of way about it, you asking us to pull away from it. That's your privilege. Check your privilege if you want to talk like that.
Yeah, tell us to fuck all that shit. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Do you think, though, can I pose a question? Like, I think people are afraid because they know Black people are angry and we should be angry, and our anger is legitimate. And when you mix that anger to an angry music, some people are afraid, you know, what's going to pop off.
Well, shit, you should have listened. You should have just let us in and just been cool about it for real, instead of pretending like it was cool and talking about us behind our back and saying some shit to our face, like at a show when no one is around, or wearing your fucking Screwdriver t-shirt and trying to get a beer next to me and shit. Like, what are you should have just not done that. You should have just let us in, and now you're scared. Be scared. We're gonna be around.
I feed off that energy when I'm at a show.
I love that shit. I feed
off that energy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking today, I had a really bad experience. I was at South by Southwest probably over 10 years ago, and I went to see a showcase with Kailasa and Crowbar. I was hanging out with some industry people, and there was a group of three white women that were standing very close to me, and they kept on staring at me the whole night. And I was like, whatever, you know. So I go to the bathroom, and these women follow me to the bathroom, and I get into the stall, and I'm going pee, and these three women started like going, when that nigger bitch comes out of the stall, I'm gonna kick her ass. Who do you think she is? Why is she here? And I was sitting on the toilet going,
Fuck.
Like, I was like, okay, I have two options. I either sit on the toilet all night or I open up the door and confront them. And so finally, I'm just like, fuck this shit, man. You know how much it cost me to get from Toronto to Texas? I'm going out. So anyway, I went out, and these three women are standing there, and I just walked up to them, and I'm like, what's up? And I must have had this crazed look in my eye because they all ran away, you know? But it was just like, even though I was scared, I knew that I'm just like, I will never look at myself in the mirror if I don't fuck these bitches up. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you've gotta...
And that comes from years of that fucking treatment. That comes from years of that fucking treatment. I grew up just keeping my mouth shut, letting these people piss all over me growing up. And then at one point, I was just like, I cannot take this anymore. I cannot do this anymore, you know? And I think that's the case for a lot of people, you know, people of color who come up trying to play heavy music. Is just at one point, you're just, if you're not going to leave, you are going to have to confront these people. You're going to have to stand up for yourself if you're going to continue to do it. And that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and I wish I would have had somebody to say to me, hey, stick it for yourself, keep in it, don't let them fuck with you, you know? So I think it's like our responsibility to give that to these younger kids coming up and doing this whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky to meet the right people. And I was able to gain access to certain places because I had friends in high places in the metal scene. But there was a couple of times where I realized that these people don't have my back. They just don't have my back. And, you know, and I just also found, like, because that Texas story I just told you, I told, like, my really good friend who's white, who was there with me, and he just didn't say anything. Like, he didn't know what to say. And do you kind of find if something like that happens with people that you interact with, you realize that they just don't know how to kind of deal with what's happened to you within, like, the metal scene? Can I ask you guys a question? Like, what do you, like, how are your white friends? Like, how do you interact with the white, either the friends in your life, your crew, like people in the industry? Are they kind of seeing what's going on, or are you able to talk to them at all about kind of race and racism?
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep anybody close who I can't talk to about this or has ever made me feel like they weren't on my side 100%. I just keep anyone who has not been on my side 100%, or I don't feel like I can talk to about this, I just keep them at arm's length. I don't play it. You know what I mean? I'm lucky because I have a few dudes that I've been close with for like a long time, and a lot of these dudes have come up with me playing and have seen the things that have happened to me. So most of those dudes are actually guys I've played with who have lived it. I've watched me lived it with me, you know, on tour or whatever. You know what I mean? But otherwise, if I can't do that, I just don't. I keep it friendly always, but I don't.
I feel it. I think with me personally, I've been so outwardly this way for so long, especially because I had like really, you know, particularly unique experiences earlier on, because I was fully immersed in Black culture growing up, and then due to like lack of funding and with education and in my area, my mom actually like lied to get me into other schools. So I went to schools that had a lot more white people in the schools, and that's when I started to make my first like white friends. Real quick disclaimer: I keep doing this on all interviews. The idea of white, ultimately, again, construct, structural. It's just an idea of power that was utilized because they were assimilating people into a place, and they needed to call you something, and then they strip people of their identities and their cultures and their backgrounds. They start calling people Black, white, this and that. So when I discuss white, I'm not necessarily, when I talk about the power of white and the structure of white, that is not to do with the color of people's skin. But when I say like when I went to school with white people, that was predominantly yes, people with much less melanin in their skin, which then society attributed intrinsically more power to them. So I was in this situation at first as a young person, seeing that early on, and because of that, I happened to be good at like sports and I was good at music and I was whatever, and I was a pretty loudmouth kid, and so I was really like involved in these groups early on. And I think the first time I even heard, which I found interesting when y'all said, how early you heard the word, nigger, like that it's crazy to me. Like, I'm like, damn, because we say, we be like, oh, nigga, like where I'm from, but the hard R, I didn't get that till I was about 11 or 12. And it hit me in such a way, so deeply, because it was being said so carelessly, so freely to someone they knew was Black, was just like
almost frightening.
Realize that this sense of power is so abounding in the existence of people that consider themselves to be white, that they can do things like say nigger to a Black person and think it's funny and not understand the effect it's going to have.
Yeah, man.
It's crazy. And not even think about it, right?
Yeah,
and
man.
then that to me is a much deeper problem, right? So that those kids saying that around me and almost, I believe, doing it to flex, so that they wanted to see how I would react because there was more of them than me. And then they could, again, sort of exhibit power over me. Them same kids are the Derek Chauvin. You know what I'm saying? They are these people running around lynching Black people right now and trying to exhibit power. And so for me, it was so early on that I was like, okay, I can't fuck with you if you talk like this, if you speak like this. And it's always been that. And I think because I've been so outwardly this way, the only time I've really experienced it like that is when you don't know me. And motherfuckers want to come into my space, especially when, at times, depending on the time of year or where I am in my life, typically they might think I'm Puerto Rican, or they might think I'm, Middle Eastern, they be assuming all this shit. So it depends on where I am, but typically, like Ethan said, I don't actively reach out and hold you and bring you into the circle if I know you ain't about it, if I know you're not with it, and I know you would ever do something that is that fucking tone deaf and crazy as to utilize the language or sustain, like I said, problematic behavior. And I want to really, since we're on this tip in like a music space, there are bands that claim to be progressive and have been claiming to be progressive for fucking so long, in my contemporaries, my peers, that have been doing that for so long, that literally are just perpetuating the larger problem by exhibiting their privilege, by saying that we don't deserve what we get because we don't do hardcore, metal, rock, etc. the way that they assume it needs to be done. That is privilege, and again, that is racism. So I think that if we're going to talk music specific, because you were discussing Metal Hammer in the op-ed, I think that bands need to sit down for a minute and go, shit, when I said, because I got motherfucking, I'm not going to call him out like that. Like Ethan said, I'm not out here trying to start internet beef, but when I see you, it's on site. At least the conversation's on site. And if you see this, I'm talking to motherfuckers being like, oh, Fever 333 deserve prison. And I think to myself, okay, first and foremost, you are, and I'll just put, this person is white from the UK, and I know his background because I did my research, I studied, and you have no relationship with not only the institution that is known as prison on a larger level, but you don't know what it's like to be Black in America and tell a nigga he need prison in America? That is crazy talk. So that he said this because of my music. He said this because he thinks that my music was adopting protest culture, when in reality, my band is literally registered as a charity. When in reality, I still go back to the hood and give as much money as I can and lose a lot of money. My profits are so fucking little because this is more than just music to me. This is about the people. This is about a culture. But he want to go on Twitter and not at me. He don't want to talk to me directly. He want to speak into the digital ether where some ignorant motherfuckers might go ahead and prop up his bullshit clamor. You know what I'm saying? So he out here talking like Fever 333 deserve prison. And that to me, again, is a prime example of the idea of whiteness in this scene that has been prevailing for so long, and ain't nobody come to check him because ain't nobody really got a relationship with prison like that or has the relationship that we have with rock, metal, or society at large. These people don't have the experience, don't have the idea, don't know what it's like, and don't know how triggering it is to be told that you deserve prison for speaking your truth about the struggle that you fucking think I should go to prison for. Do you understand how fucking crazy that is?
that shit hits different for us. You know, and but they don't think of it like that, man. They don't think of it like that because if they say that shit about a predominantly white band, it's not gonna have the same weight, not gonna carry the same weight. They're not gonna feel the same way about it. I feel what you're saying about that. That would piss me off too, man.
You know what I'm saying?
It's not right, man.
It's crazy. It is crazy that nobody else had anything to say about it. No one's a bunch of people, from what I understand, were like, yeah, we hear you, guy from this band that talks about high school or whatever, you know, but you got a nigga out here talking about systemic racism, clear ostensible injustices that Twitter and fucking Instagram just realized is real. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is generations. This is generations of something that we have literally garnered in our bloodline, traumatic bloodlines that we experience. So when you say something, understand how that's triggering, understand how it's part of your privilege, and understand how it's fucking racist. You fake, charlatan, fucking masquerading progressives. Get with it. Get with it. Because this is what it really is.
That's the kind of shit that bothers me the most is when they talk about they champion being progressive, but then they do some shit like this. And I don't even have any tolerance for that. And there's a lot of that.
Hell yeah.
Because they can say they're progressive, but it's like they don't know any black people. They don't know any people of color.
Right.
The ones that they do know, they tokenize also.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that shit happen to me. And on one hand, it's like, I appreciate you recognizing me, but
not for the right reason.
Not feeling right.
Yeah.
We're not trophies. You know what I'm saying? We're not trophies, and we ain't passes for y'all. We ain't passes so that you can say that you progressive. You know what I'm saying? We're not passes for y'all, and we're not trophies that you can put on your mantle so you can excuse your problematic behavior. This is what I'm saying. Motherfuckers, like, I just saw something on the internet where these two white kids were I can't remember what song it is, but they say nigga in the song, and they pull up a young brother. They pull him up by his hoodie, and they have him like say it and put him back down, like on some straight up like marionette blackface, like on TikTok.
And you know what? I see that, and I automatically, I feel bad for him.
Same.
I feel bad for the young black men that they pulled up and they use as a prop because you know what? These are probably the only friends he has. These are probably the only people that have accepted him. That's why he puts up with this fucking shit.
Yeah.
You know, I feel bad for him right away because I know what that is like.
Yeah.
That's a bad place to be in, you know?
Yeah.
I feel bad for him, but then I'm also just disgusted with these boys. It's like, what is going on? And, you know, it's like I just want to reach through the screen and be like, you don't need to be like, it doesn't need to be like this.
Right.
You know?
I want you guys to know it must be really weird, like, talking about this with me sitting here, like, listening, but I'm so honored that you would share that in front of me. And I feel like we're all learning a lot from this. And I am so grateful to have you here. Seriously. Thank you so much.
I think that to keep it a buck, like, I think it was like really for me was like having a space, this thing being predominantly black, to be 100%, like that whole idea for me was just so interesting and so necessary right now. So I just think the actual idea of this to me is just important and really, really beneficial. Like you were saying, Kat, like you were saying, you know, you're explaining your position in this and feeling like as though you may not have a seat at the table. And
I mean, I have a seat at the table all the time. It's time for you guys too. So,
right. But that's the thing is, as you are allowed and many people, that's the thing. And I want to talk about the grace Black people have. The fact that we on here again, having to explain to motherfuckers what this feels like, and then pulling up and dredging up trauma and these things that are very triggering for us. We are doing this, you know, because Black people are much more gracious than motherfuckers want to give us credit for. You know what I'm saying? Culturally, we just are. And if you want to come in, imagine this, okay? How many videos have you seen of like Justin Bieber or fucking some random white dude coming into the hood and doing push-ups with you know, 6-0 with, you know, neighborhood Crips? You know what I'm saying? Like, how many videos have you seen of white people coming in and enjoying Black food? How many fucking songs have you heard that have been co-opted, that have been taken from Black people? How many bits of the culture and dances have you seen on this thing? We are a gracious culture, and we are happy to have this conversation. And the seat at the table thing that I wanted to talk about was, I want people to come to the table, but it's time for people to start listening like you are doing, like you're expressing, Kat. That's what I wanted to get at, was to say that you are exemplary in what needs to happen moving forward. I think that people need to understand that we are happy to have you at this table, but don't be scared and don't be intimidated, because culturally, we a little more loud. culturally, our language might be a little more different. You know what I'm saying? Culturally, things may be different, but we are actually a very welcoming people, and we want to have these conversations. We want to have, because we are here. We have enjoyed so much just to be in rock music, just to be in metal music, just to be in hardcore music, that in its very derivation, we actually had a hand in start. We started this shit. And so the fact that we are here and just wanting to be heard is not an outrageous request by any means. And the fact that we're given this space that is, again, this thing particularly is predominantly Black, I think that that's really important. And that people that have listened or watched or viewed this far into it, thank you for that. And understand that we welcome you to understand what this is so that we can coexist. You know what I'm saying? And also, lastly, don't ask us to integrate. You know what I'm saying? Don't ask us to let go of our Blackness and then assimilate and integrate fully into this thing. We can also be part of the rock scene and be Black. We don't have to be just rockers or just metalheads or just this. We have a culture that we came, before we walked into the motherfucking door at this show, we ate our food, we did our dance, we looked the way we looked before we came into the door. So let us have that, because you're taking everything else from us. You know what I'm saying? Let us have that while we're here, for real.
Yeah, and I think that I like what you said in terms of saying, like, you know, we deserve to be here, you know, because a lot of what we get as Black, for me as a fan, I'm not a musician, is what are you doing here? You know, you go to festivals or shows, and people think that, you know, white people wonder why you're there, and they feel like you should have gotten permission to be there. And then on the other side, Black people are constantly challenging my wokeness because I am a metalhead, right?
Oh,
so
man.
you get it on both sides. And my whole thing is like, I think this is one of the reasons I love being adopted, is because I feel like I'm a free floating entity in the world, and I can do whatever I want. And nobody has any control over me. It's all about me. So I'm going to do what the fuck I want. But it's still really hard in terms of, you know, the constant, I guess it's interesting because in terms of metal, I think it's about control. Also being a woman, it's about control. I do see occasionally like young Black women at shows, and they're trying to emulate the white women at shows in terms of the long hair, the, you know, and just kind of like the attire, because I think they feel like that's what they need to do in order to be accepted within that scene, is to look as more Eurocentric as possible, you know. And I think that, you know, this new generation of girls are wearing afros to the metal shows because they know nothing that you do is going to change your mind, and it's a waste of time to care what these motherfuckers think. So you pay to get into the venue, you go to the show, you get drunk, you have a good time. Because you could be wearing a suit, I could be wearing a weave, I don't give a shit because you're still a nigger. So you might as well do what you need to do, right? And so my thing is making sure that the younger generation of, you know, Black musicians, fans, journalists, writers, industry workers have that same attitude, because we're wasting our time with these fuckers.
Yeah, instead of looking, that's straight up. I agree with you 100%. It's like we don't need to look to them for acceptance. We need to find acceptance within ourselves, within these spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let me ask you guys one more question. And I think I'm going to have Laina start, since you're a writer. What can the metal media do to help this revolution that's going on right now in a way that is not tokenizing?
That is an interesting question, because I've been asked to do a couple of things in the last week. And I resisted because I didn't want to be a token. And I agreed to do a work with with Metal Hammer, because I have a relationship with them. They've interviewed me. I've done work for them in the past. So otherwise, I think that it is a hard time, because we do need to have these conversations that are year long. There's so many bands. They're so problematic, and there's so much discussion to be had about venues and how to make sure your venue is anti-racist. there's so many bands. They're so problematic. And there's so much discussion to be had about venues and how to make sure your venue is anti-racist, and there's certain things that we can do to really promote inclusion. But there's certain publications that just pretend they have their head in the sand and they just don't want to go there. They're so afraid that their readership is going to be turned off if you start talking about real world situations. Now, heavy metal is a fantasy in some ways. I love listening to a band and I just want to like smash my head against the wall because it's so fucking good. Primitive Man. So that's exactly what I did when I was listening to your music. I was like, so I think that, but I think that there's enough content about, I know like diversity is this weird word that floats around and we don't really know what it means, but there is a lot of conversations to be had about inclusion, and making, and also reporting on bands, like, not just black metal bands from Eastern Europe, but I mean, there's a lot of garbage happening right now. There's a lot of shady shit going down that people don't know about. And we need a space to really talk about it in order to make the underground metal scene a lot better. Because if you don't have bodies in those venues, post-COVID that is, there will be no scene. People got to buy merch. People got to pay to get into shows. People got to buy the liquor at the vendors, which gets, some bands get a cut of that. Like, we as fans are supporting the underground metal scene. And if you start treating people like shit and you don't acknowledge, the GBLTQ community, the trans community, I mean, there's all different types of people coming to shows now. You have to acknowledge them. And you have to make sure that we have these conversations in print and online that are encouraging for people to come out so we can financially support the scene. So in terms of getting back to, Kat, what you were saying, like, yeah, publications need to step it up. I mean, I understand that a lot of them are hesitant in terms of talking about race or misogyny or sexism or whatever, but this is 2020, and look at what we're living in right now. We're living in a shit show. Like, we have to change the dialogue, and we have to expand what we talk about when we're talking about metal culture.
Well, and I always think it's like, if you don't want me to be such a fucking buzzkill, then maybe we should be fixing these problems then I won't have to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that, like you were saying, tokenizing, right? Like, we as Black people, LGBTQ, you know what I'm saying? Like, the other in this space, like, again, we are totems for this culture. We are not tokens, we are totems. We represent so much that has to do with this culture. And ideologically, we represent so much of what this culture has claimed to be about. So when they look at us like we're crazy or we're angry Black people or we're just acting out, that is actually a fucking magic trick that they're playing on everyone so that they can keep selling records. This is the record labels. So they can keep selling public magazines for readership. They can keep getting clicks for viewership. Managers can keep just pulling up the next, interesting fucking artists for that time and then recycle them or use them and find them. This is all about money. If you really think about it, at the end of the day, this is all about money. We're sitting atop a pillar that is economic. And the idea of economics finds its way, again, into this world. But we are just a perverse diorama of what's happening outside. This racist shit, you know what I'm saying? Like Ethan said, a motherfucker shows up with a Screwdriver t-shirt on, you know what I'm saying? And says, I just like the music. No, you don't, motherfucker.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You are racist. You're a racist because you are what you are doing, whether you know it or not. Now, this goes all the way into like implicit racism, right? Whether you know it or not, you bringing that shit into the show is making someone go, what's that? And then they're going to read it. And you're encouraging this thought. And it's what it is. And so now that we're in this place where it is a little more elucidated and highlighted, and the racism, we watched George Floyd, and now we see Rayshard Brooks, and we see these things happen. We're like, okay, we see it now. My eyes are open. But here's the thing. We've already known this well before Twitter, well before Instagram. We knew this just stepping into your scene. When we thought we were going to escape it, we were actually reminded of it in a concentrated measure. You know what I'm saying? So that's
just
what
another
we've been
fight to
with.
take on.
Exactly. In a place where we were almost willing to be vulnerable, we are attacked by that shirt, by that look, by that word that you spoke in the bathroom. We were attacked by you. You know what I'm saying? So as far as the public, as far as the media, if I'm gonna be 100, some of you motherfuckers are gonna have to get the fuck out the way because you are not emotionally, or I'm gonna keep a buck, intellectually evolved enough to have the conversation in the way it needs to be had. So you need to step to the side and just review this motherfucker's album and don't talk about fucking the issues with Black lives, trans lives, LGBTQ. You're not here for that. So make room and make space for those that are ready, are willing to evolve, and are willing to take on that burden, because it is a burden that we've been carrying for fucking ever. So whoever wants to share that with us, then you can share that with us and we will happily give it to you. But you can't come here fucking it up and misrepresenting us. And also, you can't do this to monetize us again. Monetize our bodies, our art, our minds, our beauty. You can't come here and do that again. So you got to really, if you're going to offset this, if you really going to offset it, I'm talking about equity. Fuck equality. I'm talking about equity. I need a couple more articles in this motherfucker. I need a couple more interviews on this motherfucker. You know why? Not only because I make dope music, not only because Ethan fucking makes dope music, not only because fucking Laina makes amazing books, but because we fucking have been offset for so long. And if you really sit here and act like you notice it, then why the fuck you ain't doing nothing about it? Why the fuck you ain't putting us in the motherfucking magazines? And why the fuck you silencing us every time we talk about some real shit?
Yeah.
Sorry I got so hyped, but that's what I feel.
No.
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. I like it.
This is amazing. I think it's important for us to realize that we're seeing protests in the streets right now, but this shit's been going on for a really long time, and we should have been covering these things forever. And it's important that it's not going to just be a this moment hip topic, and it's something that we need to keep on covering. So thank you so much for being so honest and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us very much. Appreciate it.
I admire all three of you so much. So just getting to talk to you all for once about anything is amazing. But, you know, getting to learn so much from you and getting to hear such honest experiences and all that was just really a special thing. I really appreciate it. All right. Why don't you tell the viewers where they can find your art or you on social media, or if there's anything else you want to plug right now?
Everything I do, you can find if you go to hellsimulation.com.
hellsimulation.com.
That
Awesome.
has links to everything, music and art and all that stuff.
Cool. And Laina?
Twitter at Laina D. On Facebook, go to whatayoudoingherebook.com. And my book is available on amazon.com.
I just noticed that it's also, I think the Kindle version is like 99 cents right now. So there's no excuse not to read it.
Yeah, because, and also it's good because I don't know, I think we're out of print copies. So Kindle is probably the way to go for now.
That's
And
awesome.
Jason?
Congratulations. My personal stuff, everything is just Mr. Jason Aalon, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. My band, Fever 333. And the one thing I really want to plug is this thing that's happening right now and that's going to continue happening and that has been happening for generations. And once you turn this phone off or close your computer, it's going to keep happening. And so when you listened this far and you heard us speaking this, that was a contract. And your contract was this, is you know it now. Now you know. So you have a choice. You have a choice. You can take this on and you can believe it to be fact because you got it from people that gave you experiential and empirical evidence on this thing, or you can keep being part of the problem, sustaining problematic behavior, and pretend like you didn't hear a word we said. I'm gonna leave that to y'all.
Yeah, don't be complicit in this bullshit any longer.
Right. Yeah.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much for watching Last Words here on The Pit. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on all the social media at We Are The Pit. And you can read articles on wearethepit.com. And as you can see, because you're on YouTube right now, our YouTube channel is youtube.com/pit. We'll see you next Thursday.